Yeah.
This is episode number 468 of WP Watercooler, UncURLing WordPress 6.4. I'm Jason Tucker. Go to my website, jasontucker.blog. You can find all my links over there.
Hey, I'm Reed. I don't know what I'm doing here or what you're doing here or what any of us are doing here, but here we are at Reed Media.
And y'all know who it is. It's your boy, Jason Cosper, back at it again on the world's most influential WordPress podcast.
And speaking of those podcasts, go over to wherever it is you find great podcasts, and you might find one of ours. And hang out with us in our Discord.
Yeah, you better.
Discord.
It's really popping off lately.
Popping off.
It has been.
And it's not just because of me.
No.
I'm not the only one.
Because they figured out how to install Discord, and now she's in there like talking with people and stuff. It's been fun.
And Tucker, who hates chat apps, is
Especially
hanging
Slack.
out on Discord. Well,
I like Discord. I like Discord.
Okay.
We're bringing back Trillion, I believe.
Yes.
We're bringing back Trillion in the form of Discord. So, you know, if you're a Zennial or a Millennial or a, sad Gen Xer, come on over. Gen Z also welcome, but I don't know.
just need to install the egg drop
No
bot
video
on the Discord server.
We've got a ton of sad Zennials up in the place.
We really do.
Speaking of sad Zennials, Scott Kingsley Clark.
Woohoo!
It's
Scott's
me.
not a Zennial. He's a straight Millennial.
Sure.
Sorry.
He's like,
Maybe the millennial part.
Yeah. Sorry. I about that was an adjective specifically relating to the millennial component, insofar as that you were born in, the years that are millennial. I'm going to stop talking now. Anyway,
what brings us here?
Today we are. I don't know if y'all noticed because things have been crazy, wild.
What?
Things have been wild, but the latest version of WordPress released on Tuesday. Did anybody catch it? It just flew by.
I couldn't update after. It was good.
I have so many thoughts on 6.4, having had this be my first release lead experience. Very likely my last.
So it was your fault, is what you're saying? Is that what's happened here?
I'm one of the team. Well, according to some project leadership, yes, the community needed to catch some more things. But there were some issues, and if you're listening to this, you probably were aware of those issues. And those issues have interesting implications in so many directions: social implications, community implications, leadership implications, technological implications in terms of literally,
just a bunch of PHP and JavaScript. Who would have thought?
Turns out it's a many-layered beast, this WordPress thing we got going on.
Oh my gosh.
But I think this is a good time to get us all on the same page. So we have the lovely Scott Kingsley Clark here with us today, and they are going to serve as our technological touchstone.
Touchstone.
For the technological part of the. Is fiasco too big of a word? Probably.
Oh, I guess it depends on if you were impacted.
Yeah, I guess so.
Was
I
not
got one
impacted.
stern email from a client about the Events Calendar Pro kicking some sort of error that was like a new error that I believe was related to that. But other than that, I'm fine.
The events calendar folks were having problems. WooCommerce people were having problems. About 15 million people had updated to WordPress 6.4 according to the download counter.
Wow.
So, take into consideration that some of those downloads, may not actually be on active sites or whatever, but still around 15 million people were on 6.4 within a day of its release.
I mean, we could write off 1 million of those as being test installs? I don't know.
Hopefully they're test installs.
2 million? I don't know. Half?
Jeez.
I don't know. But that's a lot of people in an immediate update position, because I'm not in that. All my clients are on managed hosting. And as far as I know, most managed hosts are not immediate updaters. but hence no problems for me.
So actually,
What, go ahead.
in our Discord, for folks who aren't aware, and because this isn't dev branch, so we won't be super like navel gazing and just assume that everybody is like up to date on what happened when WordPress 6.4 shipped. It shipped with an update to a library that WordPress uses called requests. And in requests for certain hosting configurations, so not all necessarily those 15 million people on WordPress 6.4 were experiencing this problem, but a lot of them were. Tiffany Bridge in our Discord, I'll just, her summary was really the best breakdown of this. Essentially, for certain hosting configurations, the thing that closes the curl request got removed from the request library. So any external request would just hang out forever, stack up, bog down performance, and fail to complete because somebody put in a one-line pull request to the request library to solve some hyper-specific problem that they were having with their intrusion detection system. One of the maintainers of that library repeatedly requested that he submit tests for his pull request. He kept claiming he couldn't, that it was too hard to test, so they merged it anyway.
So, like a little backstory there is like this impacted not necessarily every single one WordPress install. It was a very specific range of curl versions. And if you were running, like, for instance, PHP 7.4, you were more than likely impacted by this, or something below 7.4. You're more likely impacted by this. One of my sites was 7.4. I encountered this on release day. Didn't realize what it was. I was like, oh, it must be a hosting blip. I'll just update PHP because maybe my config got borked on my personal site. Updated PHP, went away. Didn't even think about it again until it clicked when I connected that occurrence with a GitHub issue that opened up.
So wait, so what I'm hearing here is if you're on 7.4 or below, it's your fault.
Well, so one of the challenges with these kinds of like really important libraries is this specific one, to its credit, had lots of testing coverage. It covers the tests are on a matrix of many different PHP versions, even 7.4. Lots of different things could have caught this. However, we're talking about specific curl versions. And when you're talking about like not just changing PHP versions, you're actually talking about multiple different other pieces and other library versions to be able to test against. I think in the near future, we're going to see new matrices added for different curl versions, but there wasn't multiple curl versions. So the 7.4 version that was tested and passed, all these things passed. That wasn't impacted because it didn't have that affected curl version.
I mean, the real kicker here is that you can't test all the possible permutations of all the different versions of everybody's library everywhere it's like exponentially, it's like trying to guess a password. Like there's just exponentially different configurations that could be happening there. So, okay, you can test for XYZ, but you literally can't test for every possibility. And and if this seems to me, this is something that speaks to the greater project, is that these little bits of it, like for example curl or the request library or whatever it is, they are very ignored. They are very much just these sort of little islands. And we've run into this problem with the recent discussions about PHP in general and the WordPress. I can never remember the right letters. It's because it's called Code Sniffer, right? The PHP Code
PHPCS. Yeah.
WPCS, PHPCS. Oh, there's too many letters. And Code Sniffer just makes me think of a dog every time, so I get distracted in my head. I'm like, oh, a dog, it's a puppy. So, but I know it's terrible. ADHD for the win. But the point being is that there are these tiny little crucial parts of WordPress, like bits of technology holding up WordPress, also holding up the whole of the internet. But, we don't have to talk about all of that. But all these little parts of WordPress that are crucial but neglected. And not only neglected, but because they're neglected, when something does change there or someone does pay attention, there's really not enough structure, infrastructure, or institutional knowledge around it to even understand how it could be impacting everywhere, because not enough eyeballs are on it to say, oh, that's going to impact this particular setup or whatever it might be, right? So there's not some one person, two people, three people, which I believe there were three main people sort of overseeing this area, right? They can't have all that information. That's not possible. So I think this is really, it's problematic from I love that we use that word so often. It's problematic from a attention standpoint and a technology standpoint.
One of the challenges I think with projects like the request library and everything else that the WordPress relies on, even PHP itself is underfunded.
Underfunded or just really not funded at all?
Underfunded, close to, I don't know the current sponsorship level, but everyone in the PHP internals has been identifying this as a major issue. They're not getting enough funding. And if the PHP library itself that everyone is using is underfunded, then you have to look at the libraries themselves built with PHP, like requests and even PHP CS, all the different tooling that all the developers across all these different plugins and companies. We use it at GoDaddy. We use it at Liquid Web when I was working there. Like we use all these different libraries to build stuff, and these are not funded well at all.
Right. I dropped it into our private chat, and I mean, there's an XKCD comic about this, because of course there is
XKCD comic for everything.
Absolutely, but it's just a stack of a bunch of precarious blocks, and down near the bottom a very thin block that says a project some random person in Nebraska has been thanklessly maintaining since 2003, and that's like all modern digital infrastructure. That is what this all comes down to. Is we have things like requests, we have like SimplePy is another one that's just in WordPress and has been like thanklessly maintained for all of these years, and
it's a house of cards. We're building on a house of cards. This is why it's so systemic. It's like not just the technology, the house. I mean, it's not just the community that's on a house of cards and built on this like crumbling facade. I feel like there's that meme going around about ancient Rome, and how many times a day do you think about ancient Rome? How many times a week? I mean, have you all heard this one?
Yeah, it's weird because I only ever think about ancient Rome when somebody brings up that meme.
Me too, except for right now, I'm like, oh, it's like that meme about ancient Rome. But except for that, everything is crumbling. Like it's like building on top of the ruins. Like the ruins are actively crumbling. It's not even like ancient Rome when the buildings were like solid. It's like
could we go back to the PHP funding side
of ruins.
Of things? So can we go back to the PHP funding side of things? So like the idea of
that quagmire.
Well, a little bit, like, when you go and buy a car and then you go and license your car, you're paying for the license, and the license is what hopefully throws some money into like paying for the roads and the infrastructure and stuff. And then you have insurance, you have all these other things. The licensing part, literally it's in the name. You're being allowed to drive that car, and by being allowed to drive that car, you can drive it on the roads as long as it's a free road that you're allowed to drive on. So looking at the PHP Foundation, all these people are using PHP in their projects, and no one's really paying anything to it. But you go look on, PHP, the PHP.Foundation's website, Automatic's on there, JetBrains is on there, Craft CMS is on there. Like a whole bunch of different, companies are listed on here. But if it's underfunded, then what's going on here?
Right. So like one of the challenges there is like, if you're thinking about, let's look at it from the top down. So the top is a developer chooses to use a library, chooses to use PHP, and so on and so on. So developer chooses to use WordPress. WordPress is funded like by all the people doing the work. Automatic throws people time into there. All these different companies throw people time in sponsoring, keeping it alive. Then the layer below that is all these libraries that we're all using, whether or not we recognize that we use them or specifically are using them for our own projects. Those themselves are being maintained by like you said it's like it's a house of cards. Like every level, there's another issue. So any level is susceptible to this. WordPress itself, you've got the libraries, you've got the people that are using libraries that are maybe Composer or NPM that rely on other libraries. All these things, all like turtles all the way down.
Don't even bring NPM into this, because then you get JavaScript and all of the node dependencies. Anytime I need to install something through NPM, I have to immediately install like 400 megs of packages just to be able to like make my CSS smaller or some shit. It's like, oh my God.
As a company,
the thing is here though, is that we, this is a great illustration of trickle down economics. I don't know, just to bring it around. It doesn't work. The trickle down, not trickling. So like the money that's coming, into that top thing. That's what I mean also about all those neglected parts, right? Once you get down a few layers, like this has been something that a good friend of the show, Courtney Robertson, has been documenting and talking about for at least a year, having gone to all of the various open source based, the PHP conference, all these various open source conferences over the past year or so or more, and being like, where's WordPress? Where is everybody? Like, there's no WordPress people there for these libraries that we are heavily dependent on. And this is, you've got your people up here putting the money in and doing all the flashy stuff and putting their WordCamp advertising in. And then by the time you get down to this bottom part, it's just not as flashy, right? No one's paying attention to those. So those things are hard to fund from a marketing perspective. And apparently that whole, the analogy of the commons, that's what this becomes, right? The commons is down here. And this is the same analogy that you were making, Jason, is that, everyone's just riding on these roads. Everyone's just using this technology and, nothing's getting to it, and not even sunlight to tell people that it's degrading, right? Because we're not even like, if you're driving on a road, you might notice that there are potholes, but the way that the technology is set up, we don't notice those potholes until something happens like Tuesday, right? Where everything starts breaking. And everyone's like, why is this breaking? What tiny little library is this over here that is super crucial? So like, that's our pothole, right? To know that like, hey, this bridge is crumbling a little bit. We should probably do something with it.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at their financials.
Is this the PHP project?
Yeah, I mean, they're literally running off of like half $500,000 in their budget.
Well, being able to speak as someone who is also an has an open collective organization, the amounts collected there is really the important part. The estimated budget, like that could go away at any time if people take away their annual pledges or anything like that. So really, I would say probably that total dispersed number, which is about $385,000. That's really the amount that you're talking about, because just the way that it works with it's not all income like that.
And there's also 1,657 contributors to the funding here.
I mean, but that could be anywhere from.
There's a lot more people using.
I mean, look at JetBrains getting up in there with the 200,000. Like, I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Actually, JetBrains did more than Automatic. I like this.
I had a quick point to this. So as a company, when you choose to use a technology, it's because you want to not have to build that technology yourself. So you choose to use WordPress. I don't want to build my own CMS. I want to use WordPress. You choose to use a library like requests. I don't want to go build this stuff in WordPress core. I want to use this library or whatever for your own project. So when you're thinking about that, as a company, at least, this makes the most sense to show as an example. A company could either use a library to save money or build it themselves and maintain it. The cost of maintaining it over time to deal with bugs and issues like that, may not be generalized, so you don't see all the bugs. You'll just encounter them yourself and deal with them as that happens over time. But that has a real cost. But when they choose to use a library and not donate to that library or any of the libraries it depends on, I feel like that is a big neglect, because now you have this money that you would have to pay for that you've chosen not to because, oh, someone else did it. So it's like copy and paste. Well, the problem here is now they're not getting any of that money because you chose the free route and just think everything is free. Well, we don't need to worry about it. And I'm sure we'll hear about it if they need something. Like, you won't hear about it when they need something. You probably won't. As a company, you should be proactive and choosing to fund all these things that you have actively chosen to use as a library instead of build yourself. Like, do an internal audit and figure out what you have. How much would it cost to replace it? Now you've got your budget. Even half of that budget or a quarter of that budget donated a year, like, would be more than a zero.
What you're missing is I believe they have put that in the column called profit, and it is no longer a cost. It is now a money I can take home, and not money I need to pay to someone else. And that's the trade-off, right? Like, because it's just right there. Why not just take that? Someone else will pay for it.
Right.
I mean, this is a bigger problem in society in general with this whole, like, taxes thing. Like, would people pay for the roads if they didn't have to pay for it with their, in order to drive their car? If it wasn't mandatory? I mean, who's opting in to, like, give away their money for something that they could get for free? I mean, I am. We are. But the corporations, especially the bigger ones, there's a real difficulty. Even if let's assume good intent. I love saying that these days. It's real fun. Rings really authentic. But let's assume good intent and say that these people don't just they realize that it's something they should be funding, but they don't even at that point know how to convey to the budget people, the accountants, the shareholders, the value of that. I mean, that's a big part of why we started the WPCC, so we could have a place to start to convey that value to people, and then they have a place to fund it, because that is really the way that, especially in America, that's how support works. It's basically money. People like what you're doing. They want to give you money. That's how that works. So, but the argument is not even there, because people don't even have that first part, realizing that it's a need, let alone the ability to then convince the people with the purse strings that it's a need to pay for, right? Like, it's a need technologically. That's already a struggle. Then on top of that, need financially, like, we're not even there. This is like, it's bonkers.
Yeah, to extend that analogy even further, to keep running with that train of thought, it's very reminiscent of the American healthcare system, where we have these like, you basically are getting all this stuff, like, through your employer. Like, there are other countries that have preventative socialized medicine that have a better rate of I guess I'm gonna
better healing rate.
Right, a better healing rate, better life expectancy, all of these things. And effectively, and maybe this is a stretch, I don't know, but like, all that we're doing with our infrastructure of, like, PHP and JavaScript and all of the dependencies and everything else, is that we're waiting for that GoFundMe to show up. We're waiting for
That's exactly what it is. We are literally doing GoFundMes for that is like, like PHP. I don't want to make light of, like, a terminal disease, but, like, PHP has a terminal disease, and we're literally putting together GoFundMes for it. You're correct. That is a terrifying and sad, but also real analogy.
And we're using less and less of it as we replace it and change things with JavaScript and other stuff. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's okay. So that's an interesting angle, right? Is it part of not to get conspiracy theorist on us or anything, but is it part of a greater agenda to un-PHP, if we're talking specifically about WordPress, to un-PHP the WordPress project? I mean,
PHP is the gasoline car, and we've started buying electric cars. And the electric cars,
maybe? We're in a hybrid.
And the electric cars don't, they don't have to buy gas, so you don't have to take some of that tax money from the gas to help fund the roadways, because
again,
it doesn't just come from the license.
Called profit. I think that
but it doesn't just come from the license that I use as an example. What I'm saying is, like, it's just like we're starting to do more things now. But the thing is if you look at WordPress itself, it is a massive collection of libraries that are in there. There's all sorts of stuff that's being pulled in, all sorts of stuff, and there's build processes that are using that as well. So yeah, there's a lot.
I mean, but that's the thing. This isn't just one roadway, right? So that's where the analogy stops, because, I mean, obviously we have more than one roadway, but it's not just like one system. This is like all the bridges and all the connecting things. Like, it's like the ground itself is what we're building this on. And it's not one road's going to go out and then we can, like, just fix that or something. This is like, it's kind of systemic.
Yeah,
this is very depressing lately in WordPress. That's all I gotta say. All right, so
they took PHP out, though. Like, it doesn't solve the funding problem. Like, now it's all shifted to all the React stuff and Node stuff.
Yeah, right. It just becomes someone else's problem.
Gonna pay for React, right? It's a joke, because I hate Facebook.
Okay. And Stephen in the chat is saying, for developers, the dependencies keep growing.
Right, but and all of this free stuff is happening, and there's no, oh, that's sad. There's no, like, other than maybe the WPCC or conversations like this, I do not see a big push in general of awareness for these libraries. There's organizations like the Open Collective Foundation that are working to allow self-help for that, but this obviously brings up governance. Everything always brings up freaking governance, but there's no structure to how we can solve these problems. There's not even a space to talk about these problems other than after the fact in a wildly fast emergency hotfix release cycle. Like, that's how we're dealing with stuff. And by the way, predominantly sponsored contributors fixing that, not a problem. I'm just saying, if that's another dependency, right? We're not just dependent on these libraries, we're also dependent on this weird sponsored corporate structure that, I don't know, I don't think it's going away, but it could go away. It's just another dependency is my point, and it has with it all the struggles that come with that dependency. Can you bite the hand that is keeping you alive? You cannot, right? So, Scott, can you solve this problem for us?
Well, yeah, I mean, well, how about what you were talking about in the chat, Scott? Like the idea of Five for the Future and using those types of hours to to contribute to PHP curl or any other types of things. Can you expand on that a little bit?
So, like, why is it? And I haven't sussed this out to figure out if it counts for Five for the Future, but why would it be that a contribution to a library that WordPress uses at the top level or the lower level, like the very basic level, could be if you were to contribute to one of those libraries, why would that not count towards you contributing to WordPress? In the same way that you're contributing to WordPress because that is helping the ecosystem. Like, how is that not helping WordPress by, like, feeding the ecosystem it relies on? I would love to see that possibly expanded out to say, like, hey, we would love you to contribute to WordPress, but also, hey, these projects need love too. So if you're not really liking WordPress itself, like, you don't want to deal with all the contribution stuff and deal with like PHP or whatever, you can use your time to invest in the other libraries that we depend on, and those libraries could use your help and funding and all
deal with
of
their
that
contribution
attention.
stuff.
Right. Right, deal with theirs.
Poison.
It is significantly easier to get something into some of those libraries than it is to get into WordPress. Just
I guess it's pretty easy to get something into the request library.
it's easy. It's easy to get a highly impactful thing in there.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously,
I wouldn't
any
even know
person can
where-
introduce a bug.
Look,
Right.
today, and we have to go now, but today, someone posted in, this is just the disparity of where we're doing all this stuff, because I wouldn't even have any clue. I don't even know where that, I went and looked at that pull request where the change was made, right? And then, regressed or whatever you call it when you put the pull request back. But like there's like buried in some like tiny GitHub, like 10, branches out from something. And literally this morning, I got a ping again from Courtney, friend of the show, about a post in a new issue in a repo for WPorg 2022, which is the current place that we are doing all of the site development for WordPress.org. Definitely still 2022. The description says this is for block themes. Like there's no correlation that this is where that stuff would happen. But for the post was about a new page or a new way to like surface some of the Slack channels that are available for contributors. Luckily, Courtney's paying attention, was able to link me up because the marketing team has been working on a contributor onboarding flow. And just on Wednesday, we created a new page that has like the instructions, but we're over here doing this contributor flow, and this other person's over in this tiny GitHub repo, like 10 pages over, making a comment. And it's like, we're talking about literally the exact same thing. And I've got 3 GitHub issues active and open over here, and they're talking about over here. And there's no connection other than Courtney, who's literally holding the project together.
The human API.
And like feet and like and our elbows and like
Courtney's all up in the crud.
Yeah, she's basically holding the whole thing together. When I say, hi, Courtney. When I say, the tape and string, I actually mean Courtney. The point is, like, how is anyone even supposed to know that that's something that needs help, right? Like, it's buried. If we can't even find the stuff for the main pages of the website that we are working on as the marketing team, how is it a tiny little library that's having, like, there's a whole discussion that's been going on in 6.4 about the Gutenberg release issue, like the Gutenberg number that should be going into each release, like which most updated version of Gutenberg, which gets updated like what, every 2 weeks, every week or something, like super like wild, fast-paced updating. And there's this ongoing discussion about which one of those libraries should go in and how it should be applied. And it's the same conversation. Like, you have to be paying attention to not just the WordPress core, but also the Gutenberg repo, and also this other one over here, and apparently the React library, and also all of the PHP stuff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, like, when we say house of cards, it's a big house of cards, and there is not a simple solution to this. And I don't know what we should do. I'm tired of feeling like I don't know what we should do. Anyway, we have to end on a fairly timely note today because we have an announcement. But Scott, if you had anything else you wanted to say before that you wanted to close out with?
Yeah, like, just to recap, WordPress has lots of attention and support for funding. There's plugins, there's all the dependencies, libraries, everything else, PHP itself, all these different things could also use love. So I'd love to keep our minds open to possibilities of how can we, as good stewards in the WordPress community and industry, help support all these things that we also rely on. The tooling, especially the things that aren't shipped, but the things that we use to build, that kind of stuff is important.
Yeah. Let's do this. Who wants to make the announcement?
Tucker.
Sure. Okay. So,
I think my phone's off. I can't do my
So we do a lot of discussions here on the EP Water Cooler during the show, and we started using Discord as our way of just having kind of an open place for people to just come and talk and hang out and everything, all text based. And so we thought we would open up something new that we're calling Aftercooler. And so if you go to WPwatercooler.com/aftercooler, or if you're already in our Discord, you can just go and find it under the mouth sounds section. And you can go hang out in there. It's audio based, not recorded. Hop in, say hi, talk.
It's a safe space.
It'd be fun. Yep.
We'll be in there after the show in a couple of minutes. We're open already, and we'll say hi over there
and hang out.
Yes, and you can pledge all your time.
Here is our outro.
Go over to our website at WPwatercooler.com.
There, we would really appreciate it. And come hang out with us in our Discord. Talk to y'all later. You have a good one. Bye-bye.